Hello there, how are you all doing? You'll have to excuse me, the Misha wanted to be on camera. Stupid cat. Yeah. There's three forms of psyop, or three situations where psyop is utilised. The first is propaganda campaigns, but that is in and of itself split into separate sort of parts due to the fact that there's white, black and grey propaganda. Then there's staged events of false flags that are then utilised again with more further propaganda, but to achieve a set goal. And then the third is unplanned events that are then utilised to spin and use for the agenda. Whenever you propagandise, you need to propagandise both sides. I've explained this before. And the reason why you need to propagandise both sides is because the propaganda is being used to create a situation where a regime collapses, say, yeah? Or a group collapses, a group dynamic that you want to get rid of, or any other thing, yeah? A person that you want to smear. So you have to propagandise both sides, those for and those against, to make it look natural. Yeah? Get your ear up there, you silly cat. Now, you do this numerous ways, any number of ways. But this practice you continue through the staged events and unplanned events. It's the unplanned events that are more interesting, because these are situations that arise that the system thinks it can utilise for its own goals. Yeah? One of the first things it does is it has a complete media blackout of that event as best it can. Yeah? At the same time, it'll utilise its own agents to smear the event as being misinformation or disinformation, and continue to smear it using fake videos, fake props, fake information. It's with these events you have to be very careful, because at some point the script will be flipped and they will use it solely for propaganda at some point, once you've gained control of the narrative. And it's that narrative control, that is their main goal, yeah? With everything. Especially these unplanned events, because they show a side of the system, a weak point to the system, yeah? Something that they're desperate to keep a lid on. Why am I talking about this? Because of Iran. This was organic. I don't care what anyone says. This was organic and not expected. And you can tell it wasn't expected by the way that the system tried a blanket ban on all information about it coming out. They then started to insert little bits of information here and there to rile up a certain crowd. And we all know what that crowd is. This is an affront against Islamism in general. People tend to forget that Khomeini's regime is a CIA regime. It's a CIA front. It was used to breed extremism, mostly to create jihadis to use against the Russians in Afghanistan. That was the whole sole purpose. In fact, the more extreme madrasas, yeah, which are Islamic schools, were promoted and funded more by the CIA in Iran specifically because of the Ayatollah regime to basically bolster the Mujahideen's numbers, which was Osama bin Laden's army that he funded in Afghanistan, that then became Al Qaeda, or the database. And all of these are now mercenaries that are used as largely an army called ISIS. Al-Jawlani, who's in Syria, who's a former ISIS general supposedly, is in fact Al Qaeda or a mercenary and just a front. The whole of the Middle East is a front, I keep telling you this. When you hear stories of the CIA and Mossad being on the ground in Iran, who do you think they're going to be working for? Ask yourself honestly, who do you think they're going to be working for? If Khomeini's regime is a CIA-led operation, who do you think the CIA and Mossad are going to be siding with? Honestly. They need to keep the status quo going. And this is another indication of why it's organic in Iran. Because there's still a media blackout, because they're still trying to take control of the narrative that's coming out of there. They're trying to orchestrate pro-regime protests. They're trying to spread misinformation about what's going on there, to dull down what is essentially a organic revolution. The people have had enough, and it shows the rest of the world what to do, or inspires them, which is another thing that they don't like. People being inspired to break their own regime. You see, as I've said before, Islam, or a form of Islam, which is Islamo-communism, is effectively the system of control that they want for everybody else, and will be if we allow it. Anyone who's turning around and talking about Iran being a CIA or Mossad talking point is either deluded, completely brainless, or is an intel operation. It's that simple. And I think we all know what I'm talking about. We're at a point now where real change can happen. And it can be inspired by what's going on in Iran, if it's not ignored. Because that's another thing that painting it as a Mossad CIA operation does. It makes you ignore what's going on there. And that's the whole point. Because then they can gain further narrative control. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Stuff like this needs pointing out. People that propagate this kind of information need calling out. Because like I've said, if the Iran regime falls, why is this a bad thing? And like I said last time, those people can't answer. Anyway, thanks for watching.